Hi guys, and welcome back to another Metal Roast review. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. And as always, go ahead, hit that subscribe button, keep updated on all the content coming out on this channel. So today, going to be doing a quick review about the new album by Architects. This band doesn't really need much introduction. They're one of the biggest names when it comes to the British metalcore scene, and they are out now with their 9th studio album called For Those Who Wish to Exist. And this album is the band moving furthest away from their sound and opting to do something fresh, new, and exciting for their audience. So we're going to jump right in and see if it paid off. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and let's do this. So if you don't know, last weekend I had my weekly live stream, and it just so happened that one we were listening through the Architects album and sort of critiquing and giving our thoughts about it. And overall, my first impression of the album was not great. I gave it a 4 out of 10, and I thought it was lacking in a lot of areas. I also felt that their fans would feel a bit alienated listening to this new concept and new ideas they were going about. However, the album did have its merits, and I will discuss them in a sec. But overall, the album was a bit lackluster, and generally I was disappointed. Moving to a couple of days later, re-listening to the album, writing this review for it, I did spot more merit in the album that I didn't originally hear. However, I also did spot some issues that I may have disregarded when I was listening to it the first time. So to kick it off, we'll just go through the quick highlights. I really enjoyed the added elements such as orchestration, synthesis, beats, EDM inspired moments in the album. I think it's refreshing. It is a more modern take on metal. A lot of bands have been doing this, so I had no issues with that at all. And on top of this, also adding industrial elements to the album, which again, is the versatility and expands their sort of toolkit as well. For an album that generally wasn't what I'd call heavy by Architect standards, the industrial elements that were provided gave and retained that heaviness that the band is so well known for. And if I were to pick out a couple of songs that really were highlights for me, one would definitely be An Ordinary Extinction and Discourse is Dead. These songs were heavy. They were Architects to its core, and it retained that weight and impact that I was worried that this album would be losing. And on top of that, we also had the track Flight Without Feathers, which was this really cool interlude section in the middle of the album that broke up the album into two halves, gave you sort of a breathers before diving you straight back into the ocean of sound that will continue afterwards. So I did appreciate that. It was sort of like a chill step EDM thing happening. I really enjoyed that stuff, and I think it's a great way to sort of break up an album. And to put the cherry on it, my favorite track was Impermanence. This was, I think, for me, one of the more heavier tracks. Definitely, it had atmosphere at the start, it had atmosphere throughout, it had a lot of visceral emotion. The beats in it were really impactful. The writing was pretty strong, and on top of all that, it featured guest vocalist Winston McCall from Parkway Drive, which I haven't heard from Parkway Drive in a long time, so to see him back again was quite a pleasure, and he really brought his own level of intensity and grittiness. It just suited so well. I just wish there was more of that in the album. Now, unfortunately, now we have to get into the things that weren't so great about this album. So the biggest thing about this album I had issue with was the impact. It had moments of impact, but when you compare it to their previous albums such as Lost Together, Lost Forever, All Gods Have Abandoned Us, and Holy Hell, it just pales in comparison. This feels like a sort of a mainstream attempt at being a metalcore band. It's really disappointing because one of the things I loved about Architects, I always thought they had probably the best impact when it came to metalcore. When I think back to it, when I initially got into them, the first track I listened to was Gravedigger. And if you know Gravedigger, that opening breakdown, when it comes in, it just blew my face off. It was so in your face, so weighty, so heavy, and it really made the band distinct from every other metalcore project I'd heard up until that point. And this was continued on in their album that followed with All Gods Have Abandoned Us, that same heaviness, weightiness, aggression, giant sound that made them in a league of their own. When it comes to this album, it just isn't there. It doesn't feel there at all. It feels like more of a mediocre metalcore band trying to incorporate new elements in their sound, trying to aim for the more mainstream listener base, which I guess for Architects at this point in their career, maybe they do want to expand into a more mainstream thing. If that's the case, then I have no choice but having to compare them to Bring Me the Horizon, who kind of did the same thing. Back in the days, my favorite album was Sempiternal. It was a great album. It was heavy. It had all the metal elements, all the weight, all the impact. And then afterwards they brought out That's the Spirit, which I felt was this industry level mainstream album that was clearly trying to capture more wider demographic and incorporate so many elements and writing styles that reminded me of Linkin Park, and overall I thought it was just a very bad album. Similarly here, I see Architects doing the same with their very much cleaner writing style. It is easier to listen to. They've gotten rid of a lot of complexity as well in their riff writing and opted to do just very standard chugs, which I have no issue against chugs, but for a band like Architects, I did have a higher bar set for them. And also because of the accolades they do receive for being one of the best British metalcore bands. And to continue with that, I also have to say that I was getting annoyed as well at times when it came to just the writing per song, where tracks where we'd have these really big energetic openers that would just lead to these very low energy verses that had to sort of play a lot of catch up to get back to that high energy level, especially on the second half of the album. I just felt like it was very low energy. And to top it all off, they ended the album on a very interesting note of having acoustic guitars, which I have nothing against acoustic guitars, but for a band like this to end your album on an acoustic guitar ballad, I thought was a bit disappointing, if I'm being honest. And it just sort of made the whole album to be sort of like they'd have a peak here at the start of the album with tracks like Black Lungs and stuff, and then it was just over so slow, just trailing off until the very end when there was just nothing left. And just to go quickly back on the point of being more mainstream, I felt on this album that Architects kind of lost a bit of their identity. The band just sounding like every other metalcore act that is out there. Bands such as Kingdom of Giants, Invent Animate, Era, like all these other bands. But when it comes to Architects always felt like this huge giant of a band that was distinct. You knew exactly what they sounded like. You could hear a note and you would know that that was Architects. And then with this album, it just sounds like a lot of the other bands in the ocean that is the metalcore and djentcore genre. It's kind of sad, but I will say that as much as this album didn't come up to expectation, it is nice that it was a refreshing change than having a fourth album that sounded like the previous three. I just wish they didn't go in this direction with it. So overall, my verdict for this album hasn't really changed that much, but I sort of will make this statement as sort of a hopes for the band in the future. Sort of a long-term investment sort of idea. Once again, I'm going to have to compare it to Bring Me the Horizon because I can't really find any other band that this would relate to. So Bring Me the Horizon brought out the album, That Is the Spirit. Overall, not a great album. However, after that album, we got Ammo, which was on its own a great album. It wasn't a metal album per se, but it was overall a great album, having the sort of pop rock elements, the pop punk elements as well, rock in general. And as a standalone album, if you were to ignore the whole discography prior to it and just judged it on its own merits, it is actually a really good album, and hence why it got Grammy nominated. Similarly, I can say the same about Architects as well, where this is sort of their version of That's the Spirit. It's a mainstream album catering to getting a wider fan base. But saying that, it could mean their next album can be amazing. I don't doubt that. I think when you're doing a lot of changes in your sound, as they did here, it can have growing pains. And of course, some fans are going to like it, some fans are not going to. But if they stick down this path, I generally think their next album could be amazing. Their version of Ammo. It might not be metal, it might be even more tame than what we got here, but it still could be an amazing album on its own. With that, we will see. But that's my sort of 2 cents on that issue. But overall, as a rating, I would still give this album a 4 out of 10. It missed a few marks, a good few marks. However, there is still moments on the album which I really enjoyed, and a lot of the elements I still enjoyed and what they incorporated that definitely makes it more modern and refreshing to listen to. But anyway, that is my review for the new Architects album. For those who wish to exist, write down what did you think about the album. Did you like it? Did you not? If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel to keep updated on all the content coming out. But besides that, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.
Waiting on the wings, reaching out and never play the future.